wonderful community of transformers and our community of soul space. It is my absolute pleasure to be here as your transformational guide, Patti Tucker, introducing to an incredibly, well, I want to say infamous woman, because you've done things that are groundbreaking and reached out to so many people, Magenta, and have influenced their lives and transformed their lives. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Magenta Pixie. Magenta Pixie has been in communication with a collective group of light beings, or a higher self aspect, since 1993. She affectionately refers to these beings as the white-winged collective consciousness of nine, or simply the nine. Regular meditation and a journey of synchronicity within her own life led to this awakening and connection. Magenta releases her messages from the nine in video form on YouTube. Highly recommend you tune into these videos. Since releasing her first message in 2008, she has attracted over 50,000 subscribers, but I know that's growing because I've been checking in with YouTube and it's growing substantially. She has worked individually with clients all over the world and is the author of Masters of the Matrix and Divine Architecture and the Starseed Template. Channeled books teaching individuals, particularly Starseeds and light workers, which we're going to talk about, to find their own sovereignty through the understanding of their own energy systems. Her passion in helping people to move through trauma, embrace the enlightenment and ascension path, and find their own connection with creativity, divinity, and joy. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome Magenta Pixie. Welcome.
Thank you, Patti. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak, and lovely to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. I cannot wait to begin this conversation of your own transformation. And the way I like to start this off, Magenta, is with, as a child, did you come in sort of pre-programmed to sort of know that there was something bigger happening? Or was this just, did this come up later on in life? So please share with our audience what you were like as a child.
Yes, it's actually pre-programmed in as a code with every starseed. So if a starseed's going to go through an awakening, that's going to be a pre-programmed code in their blueprint. And sometimes they might not wake up until later on in life. But with me, it was in childhood, but I didn't know. Obviously, as a child, you don't realize you're different from anyone else. You think everybody's the same. You're quite subjective in the way that you exist. So from a very, very young age, I had imaginary friends when I was very young that I would talk to all the time. My parents were both in the theatre, so I was around a lot of theatre people, but my father at the time was kind of very interested in hypnotherapy, hypnosis, and the mind and psychology. And so he would, you know, I guess, practice on me, I think, a little bit. And when I was very, very young, if I had a headache, he would say his ring was magic, and he'd take his ring off and say, I've got a magic ring, and when you hold it, it's going to, you know, heal you. And these things happened. It would take my headache away. And so lots of things like that occurred. So I obviously chose certainly the right parents in that respect. But when I was a little bit older, I think I was about 7, my parents both got into ESP, and they were like these ESP cards, and you'd have on them wavy lines, a circle, a square, and they were testing each other. And then one day they decided to test me. As their oldest child, I was always around them, so they tested me, and I don't really remember or being aware of what was happening. I just remember that they would show me a card, so they'd have like the circle or the wavy line facing them, and all you would see is the back of a card. And I just remember looking and seeing what it was. So I would say wavy line or square or whatever, and they were both staring at each other and just dead still and, you know, asking. And then I was about 6 or 7. And when we got to the end of it, they were adding up the score and they're going, that's impossible. It can't be. And he's going, I don't know, do it again. And I'm sat there like, am I in trouble? Have I done something wrong? Well, what actually happened was I was getting incredibly high scores on this ESP thing, and you know, the amount of hits I was getting was like, you know, extremely high ESP sort of thing. But my parents were just surprised and a bit sort of I think my mum was a bit freaked out by it, and I just remember that being, they didn't really talk about it or encourage me or even explain what it really meant until much later. It was a case of, okay, yeah, that was good. You played the game really well. Off you go, and I'll go off and play. When I was about 7, I remember just sitting in my bedroom, actually, on my own, and there was a cup in front of me. I'd just had a drink of milk, I think. And I remember just looking at the cup, and all of a sudden, I just remember staring at the cup and trying to move it with my mind without using my hands. And I tried again, really concentrated. I knew nothing of telekinesis. You know, I was 7. And I remember being really upset because then these memories, which I couldn't really process at that age, I knew that I'd been able to move things with my mind at some point in some other time. And I was upset, and I felt this sense of loss and like, why can't I do it anymore? You know, and that was when I was about 7. And at around the same time, I'd be in the garden, sitting at the bottom of the garden. We had a wild bit in the garden, and I would sit there and I would know that there were beings there that I would perceive as fairies. And I used to sit and cry, literally cry my eyes out. I would say, why won't you talk to me? I'd say, please show yourselves to me. I won't tell anyone. I promise you. And they just, obviously I was expecting to see a fairy, and right. I could feel them, and I could sort of talk to them and just about get some kind of, I didn't understand how to decode code at that time, and you know, I was only 7. So yes, these things happened. I remember my father, when he was hypnotizing me once, and I was really young. I mean, I must have been about 5 at this time. And he asked me about, would I be okay to be hypnotized? And I said, can you hypnotize me to go out of my body? Now, how I would know about going out of body, never heard of it. I was 5 years old. And I remember my dad being really shocked, and then actually doing this, actually taking me into a relaxation, because obviously he knew about astral projection or lucid dreaming or whatever. And I do actually remember coming out of body. But he hypnotized me, or rather it was my perception, I don't actually remember which way round it was, to be in a bubble. So I remember being in a bubble, a little pink orb above my body and looking down at my body. So these things occurred in childhood, because my parents were kind of, especially my father, were kind of dabbling in this. When they split up, when I was about end of 7, just coming up for 8, my father continued to be very interested in this path of discovery and self-expression, but my mother turned completely against it. So then there were real problems with me and her, because I was still like that, and she didn't like it in me and did everything she could to sort of squash it, but it didn't really work. As you can tell. Yeah.
So you bring up this beautiful child that had all this, what I'm going to call imagination and a magical internal world. And you refer to it as a starseed. Can you share with our audience some of what I would call starseed attributes, or, you know, special gifts that a starseed might have that they don't know?
Well, they'll have a deep imagination, a vivid imagination, and when they're children, this potentially might get them into trouble. They'll be told, stop daydreaming, get back to the real world, you know, get told off and punished for not being in the moment, especially at school when they're staring out the window and going off into what's called the daydream, which is incredibly important for your development, but obviously the system doesn't understand that or actively discourages it. So starseeds will know that they're different. And as a child, given the fact that we're now in 2018, looking back at where the children would have been that are now adults, children now are going to have somewhat of a better time because there is more awareness here. But when we were children, you know, starseeds of the same age as me, there wasn't. So they would have been feeling some kind of shame, or that they're different, or they would be rebellious and think, no, I'm going to daydream as much as I want, because they would know that it was right. So they'd either, the crystals would go into lack of self-esteem and shame and, oh, I'm bad and I'm being different and no one else is like me, and they would try to stop it. And an indigo would be like, I'll daydream as much as I want. They would be rebellious because they've got this, you just can't knock an indigo down. And with a crystal, you can make them, but they'll always come back because that crystal energy, that crystal code is always there. So they would be, the indigos are quite warrior-like in their attitude. They would be able to tell when somebody is lying. They are system busters. They know when something is wrong. They know when a planet isn't harmonious, a society, a person. They're very much for truth. They're very loving, but they can be incredibly belligerent and come across to a non-understanding parent or teacher as a naughty child, but they're not being naughty. They are standing for truth, and often the child is right and not the caregiver. They will have had some kind of experience of other realms. They may have had some kind of visitation. That was another thing I forgot about. I did have beings come to me when I was really, really young, but I didn't know what they were. So they will have had some kind of visitation. They will know that they're different. They might have been, called names like you're weird and, this sort of thing. I mean, starseeds would just be different from day one, but they will know inside. And also many of them, all of them will have come in with a code regarding the Great Gathering. So there would have been a knowing within them. You need to look for other people and gather with them. You need to create this tribe. And it's big, but they wouldn't understand what that would mean. So they would be looking for people like them. They will have a yearning to find their family, but they won't understand where to look. And they can get really upset because obviously, especially if they were children when I was a child, it was like years ago. So the Ascension was like a long way off kind of thing. And so we would get a bit upset because these feelings wouldn't be making any sense to us. So especially the indigo starseeds would have had a really tough time. They've come in to clear a lot of karmic work that the indigos are doing. The crystals would have felt out of place in a different way. And of course, there are other starseeds with other codes within them. So really a feeling of being different, a feeling of being alone, a feeling of not being in the right place. They may even feel that they're with the wrong parents. They may feel that they're on the wrong planet, all of these things.
Well, you were so fortunate because you really did have the right parent. Your father seemed very complimentary, very supportive of your journey. Sadly, your mother wasn't, but I'm sure she came around in later years.
No, not really. But with my mother, what actually happened with her is before I was born, when she was younger, she decided to, or was led into researching archaeology. And she went to a museum and she was looking at all the artifacts and Tutankhamun and Egyptian artifacts, Egyptian jewelry, paintings, everything. Her and a friend, she absolutely loved it. But when she did this, she started to hear voices and they would start talking to her and telling her things. So, of course, obviously she'd activated the code. And she was terrified, and she would just say to them, go away, leave me alone. Well, obviously, if you tell them to go away too often, you do shut it down. It probably wouldn't happen now because the energy is so conducive. But back then, I mean, this was before I was born, and I was born in 1965. So this must have been around late end of the 50s, early 1960 something. And she stopped being interested in Egyptology because of it. She shut it all off. Although she opened up a little bit when she was with my dad, obviously with me and a few things, once they split up, she turned away from it completely and it went the opposite way. So anything that would show any kind of opening up psychically in any way, she would actively be afraid of. And no, she's not really changed that much. Obviously it's different now because she knows what I do, and especially since I've written books, and you've written a book. But what she did say to me when I showed her my book was, Well, it's all very well, but why didn't you write fiction? I thought you were going to write some fictional stories, as if to say, what have you wasted your writing on that for? So yeah. But my father, absolutely. I mean, he went on to become a hypnotherapist and saw many, many clients, and over the years, he's been kind of my number one teacher.
I was going to say, I bet he's your biggest fan besides me.
Yes, I mean he's got dementia now, unfortunately, and so he's in a home, you know, in a care home. I visit him and look after him, and but he still knows. I can still talk to him, you know, and tell him what I'm doing. And some days he does remember. And it's funny, he's got this dementia thing where he doesn't know what he's eaten for dinner, and he doesn't know what clothes to wear, and then all of a sudden he'll just come out with something like, yeah, that's what Freud said. And I'm like, what did you say? So there's still some memories there of his, but when he was, you know, when I was sort of growing up, he was studying Freud and Jung and hypnotherapy, and you know, and he taught me lots and lots.
He was ahead of his time.
The channeling, though, wasn't something that he had studied. He would look at the brain, which I'm very pleased about, actually, because obviously he could actually tell me what I was doing psychologically. And I would say, do you believe me that there are beings talking to me? And he would say, I remain open-minded. And he would, he would never go, yes, of course. He would... Yeah, and of course it kept me aware of the psychological side. So even when they were talking to me, I would say, are you my subconscious mind? Are you my imagination, like my father says? And they would say, yes, we are. So you're saying that this is my imagination? Absolutely, they would say, oh, of course it is. But then I would then go on and you know, have more conversations with them.
Are you referring to the 9?
Yeah, well, at that time, no. The first connection I made was with a 5th dimensional entity called White Spirit. So a individualized entity. So at the time, I felt I was speaking to one being. I didn't know at the time that in the 5th dimension, that although they take the form of one being, you are always looking at a collective consciousness or a group soul entity. But I did not know that. So for many, many years, I would talk to just one entity. And obviously, they will not present in ways that is too much for you. So if I'd have had like sort of 20 or 1,000 entities in front of me, I would have thought, I would have thought I was going crazy, and it would have been too much. So they won't, or rather your own programming, your own matrix when you're in balance, and your own blueprint that's coming to the fore, it won't present to you more than you are able to assimilate. But what it will do, or what they will do, or what the experience will do, is take you to the absolute limit of your ability to expand, because that's the quickest way to move through expansion. So they will take you to they won't do this every day, but as someone who is on an ascension path, you will get to a point where you go to such an expanded state, and you can literally feel the mind opening. You know, you can feel it expanding, and you will get to the point where you're thinking, my mind is being blown. I just cannot assimilate these concepts. But then there's this other part of you, or your guidance system, whatever, that will say, well, yes, you can. But it will never go to the point when you're in balance with this, and you have been trained in balance since birth. You will not get to the point where the 9 would call it a volcano. Actually, they would say it's like a volcano rising to the absolute top, but the volcano will never erupt. That's the metaphor for the ability to assimilate this information. When people do actually move into mental problems and insanity through a spiritual journey, it's because it's been taken in a fragmented sense or alongside traumas. And so it's kind of a disassociative response to a trauma, rather than a balanced opening and an expansion. So they're different things. So yes, it happens to people, but not if you're taking this journey and you're grounded and you're balanced and you're following your guidance system. But back then I didn't have any, yes, I had my dad, but he didn't really know about channeling. And sometimes he would question it a lot, as in, to the point where I'd go home and think, you know, is something happening to my mind that shouldn't be? And because he hadn't gone to he hadn't understood the spiritual journey that the mind can take. He had gone to a certain level,
Right.
but not, or he touched on metaphysics, but a lot of his study was from reading and books and certain intuition, whereas with me, it was just what he told me and then what I was being told from white spirits. I didn't sort of really have any, we didn't have the internet basically. So.
Yeah. And I have found in my own personal journey of transformation that this kind of stuff transcends the mind. We can't even begin to understand it in the mind, but if we can feel our way and navigate our way through it, you know, it's much easier. And I have found personally, and I'm sure you have too, that the less, I mean, it's good to ask questions, but the more that we just trust and have faith that the information that is coming through is truth, and accept it, and as you say, maintain a balance, then the more just seems to come.
Absolutely. All of that is completely true. I will say, however, that you can try to make sense of this with the mind, though, but it's when you're using the mind only without balancing with the heart that there can be problems. Also, when you receive information, on the one hand, you must trust and allow that this is just, you know, a flow and it's truthful. But I also feel, especially if you are going to, or if you already are in a capacity where you're teaching others in any shape or form, and I'm just talking about, you know, chatting to your neighbor who's asking questions spiritually, or your family, if you are going to share information, then you need to have some questioning as well as the trust. So there has to be an analysis as well as the trust, and this is the crystal indigo energy. So the crystal is pure trust, pure flowing, pure being, open heart, no analysis needed. It's all just there, and you are just being in that energy. And the crystals, that's how they will operate, because that's predominantly the codes within them that they've incarnated with. But then you've got the indigos that are quite analytical, and they will want to learn, and they will want to explore what these things mean, and they won't be satisfied unless they've had more answers. So there's
the children that are coming in today. Well, let's just back up a little bit, because I have a son who's in his 30s, and I think we've talked before, and you've got children. Would they typically be the indigo children, the crystal children?
Both.
Yeah. So it's exactly, and I want to really emphasize that to our viewing audience, is that we're all star seeds.
Yes.
Right. And it's that activation, that code that activates, that opens, whether you're more indigo or crystal, or how does it work?
Right. Every single individual on the planet is a star seed by virtue of the fact that they are seeded from the stars, and they in turn are able to seed the stars themselves, which is new information. I didn't realize we were star seeds because we had the seeds. I've only just found that out recently in the writing of my my next book. That's kind of come out, which was new. So everyone on the planet is a star seed, but they are star seeds in potential because there's a lack of activation for whatever reason. We've incarnated into a system where there has been deliberate repression of the awakening going on, which, you know, people are quite familiar with, I'm sure. So when you awaken, and many starseeds will be blueprinted with these codes, and because they're set to do something, so say they're set to have a third dimensional job because they need that job because of their experience. So say they're going to, you know, drive a train, not running train drivers down whatsoever. Very, very important job. Let's just say you're going to be a train driver. There could be other things going on in your life, so you may well awaken. But what I'm saying is you may have different codes because the train driving is incredibly important for what you need to learn and experience. But say
Right.
somebody is going to be a healer or a channel or a public speaker or a spiritual teacher and is taking a sort of a leadership role, or really more of, it's not really a leadership role because we're all equal, but I mean a role where you're going to be reaching other people, then you will need to have more time spent on the training. So you'll awaken as a child, whereas if you're a train driver who maybe is going to meet someone when you're sort of 50 something and then go into a spiritual awakening, you might not wake up until you're 40 or whatever. It
Right.
doesn't matter, because the minute you wake up, there is no time within the higher realms, there is no time within the DNA activation, it's non-linear. So it doesn't matter if you wake up when you're 2 or when you're like 60, it makes absolutely no difference, because the point is you've woken up and you're following your path. But what the 9 mean when they say starseeds is conscious starseeds and activated starseeds. So you've got individuals who are fully awake, they're on a conscious ascension path, and they know that they're here for a reason. They know they found their path, they know that they're a starseed. Or they might be thinking, watching something like this, watching this interview and thinking, I wonder if I'm a starseed. Well, yeah, you absolutely are. If you've got that question if you're here watching this video and you're thinking, I wonder if I'm a starseed. I wonder if I'm feeling I might be. Yes, 100%. You wouldn't have that questioning because that's the awakening of the code. But when you see people who are going about their third dimensional lives and are not aware of the intricacies of the truth of life, they are still starseeds with dormant codes and haven't woken up for whatever reason. And the way the 9 explained it to me is you actually change timelines. So say you've got a girl called Jane and you've got a girl called Sarah. So Jane doesn't wake up spiritually in her whole life. So one would say Jane is not a starseed, even though we're all starseeds. But in that reality, she's not a starseed because she hasn't woken up spiritually. But Sarah wakes up. Now, say she wakes up when she's like 23. So when she's 22, she's not a starseed. When she's 23 and she wakes up, what she actually does is shift her entire matrix. She changes her future trajectory because of where she is. She changes her past, which means she's always been a starseed.
Right.
So it's about the awakening itself, because you change your past and future. The reason why you change your past and future is because you've connected upwards. When you connect upwards to the higher aspect, you are also connecting to the future aspect. It's one and the same. We try and analyze all this with distance and with direction, but it's all one and the same. So if you go upwards into an awakening, you are going forward into the future. All starseeds have incarnated from the future into the past. Now that can be remembered from a linear perspective, because your first seed point will be something like, say it's the Pleiades. The Pleiades in the 5th or 6th dimension was your first seed point. You would then incarnate back into 3rd dimensional Earth. But really, it's more than that. It's actually everybody was source, which is the highest possible dimension where there are no dimensions. It's complete unity. We're all from there, and we come down from there into separation and here in the 3rd dimension, and go back. So we're constantly moving in this sort of cycle, in this flow.
Magenta, is there any way for our listeners today that are sitting with us, and yes, they're all going, oh my gosh, we're so excited. So we are star seeds. Is there any way for them, or any tools that you can give them to activate more of their systems? Or does that happen? Does that have to happen naturally, organically, divinely timed?
All of it, all of the above. So divine organic activation, you just go about your life and just allow this to happen and start thinking and analyzing what's coming up, or not analyzing, just going with energy, following your heart, whatever it may be. One really good tool is to put out an asking. So you can literally ask. It doesn't matter if you don't know who you're asking. Well, with caveats. If you are a complete beginner with this and you want to ask, and when I say ask, I mean something like, am I a starseed? Am I here to be part of this ascension process? Like Magenta Pixie says, could you please show me? Show me
Mhm.
the proof. Teach me. What do you want me to do? You make this plea, this asking, and to bring yourself into alignment, there are many things you can do, but one is to just visualize white light around you and just say something like, I ask for all information to come to me that is in alignment with Christ consciousness, the Christ, the Christ, the Christos, or whatever angelic, higher Jesus, all of these energies. It's unlikely that a innocent asking starseed would be infiltrated anyway, because darker entities will only come when you are out of balance yourself. If you have a pure open heart and you're in complete surrender and in all innocence. I just watched this video with Magenta and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm a starseed. Can you help me? If that's asked with pure innocence, that's utter protection. You don't need the white light, it's already in you. So that's one thing to do, is asking. You can do this through meditation. If you don't know how to meditate, you can do guided meditations. But there's another route, and that's the route of fast tracking and research. So you've got the being and the doing and the asking and the meditating. You don't need to sort of talk to anyone or go to groups or anything. But then there's the other journey, which is very much the indigo path. Research everything you can get your hands on, read every book that you can find, go to groups, talk to people, get involved in workshops, get online, go on YouTube. Study. It's a fast tracking that will activate you. And there are not just spoken videos like mine on YouTube, but there are artworks that will activate you just through the picture. For example, sacred geometry, mandalas, all sorts of artwork, any artwork that, well, anything you feel drawn to really, but things with fairies in and unicorns, and Leonardo da Vinci's work's got loads of codes in it. I mean, there's the ancient art that people painted years ago, religious paintings, biblical paintings, the codes are everywhere. Shakespeare, I mean, if you want to be activated, you are surrounded by activation codes. Not only are you surrounded by them in your outer life, you've got them inside your body. So
this is what I've just had this aha moment. We're on physical earth, and physical earth and Mother Nature is programmed to activate us. Every experience in life can be programmed to activate us. Our time is coming to an end, Magenta, but I want to ask and leave our listeners with this. I know there's an incredible ascension on. Everybody's talking about, as a collective consciousness, as humans, we're beginning to awaken. Do you see this happening, an awakening, an ascension for good in our lifetime, or do you feel it's going to take a while?
Well, we're in it right now, and the ascension's already well underway and already happening. So when you step into that energy, it doesn't make any difference if you're stepping into an ascension in 2018 or in 100 years. We are in that energy. So it depends what stage of ascension you are talking about. There are stages to ascension, and you don't have to know what those stages are in order to ascend, because that open-hearted, loving side of you will naturally take you through those stages. But for the indigos who want to know, it's good to know about those stages. So do I see an ascension in this lifetime? Absolutely, 100%. But it depends, are you meaning, which level, which level to ascension? It's an ongoing process is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to ask on behalf of our soul space audience is, there seems to be so much suffering in the world. And although I believe there's a shift, I think that when I look around and I speak to different individuals, there's still so much suffering. Will these energies in the next several years, will they alleviate some of that human suffering and pain? Do you sense that coming?
I do, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that all suffering will end in that short space of time, because what's happening is the third dimension is changing its form, it's changing its structure to match this ascension frequency. And the problem is, or the journey is, there are individuals on this planet who don't want the ascension to occur. They have been trying to prevent it because they have a different agenda. And so we're working together with this sort of positive and negative force. Now, what's already happening is the negative force is already, you know, losing already, if you like, that it can't be stopped. It can't be stopped because there's so much help available from outside sources, if you like, but those outside sources are still us. We create through our consciousness, we create group souls that then there are extraterrestrial families and angelic spirit beings, but they're all connected to us, and they come in to assist us based on where we are as a collective. But I'm talking about the starseeds, because the activated starseeds are the ones that are creating this energetic match, which is causing the third dimension to change its formation. And in that change, we're going to have, you know, if you imagine a nice sort of waves washing on the shore of a beach, that's not going to change the structure of the sand and the rocks. What will change the sand and the rocks are a lot of crashing waves. So we've got some movements and shifts going on as we watch the third dimension change its structure. That is happening, but everything is on track for where we are going. And it isn't really, I mean, yes, it's about us individually, of course. It's absolutely about us always, and it's our life. But this is very much about the collective, and it isn't just about the collective on Earth. It's about planet Earth herself. It's about our entire solar system, and it is about outside of that and right up to source. An ascension process affects the entire emanations either way. So you are this is what it means by going galactic. You are really taking your place in a cosmic society. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to, you know, go out and have tea with extraterrestrials, but we might. But the point is, we're taking our place in this. So yes, things are changing and it's all good, but we are going to have to see some shifts which are difficult for people. But the reason why it's difficult is because things are being revealed that have been kept from us, and that's going to shock a lot of people, especially in the political scene. You know, so when things come up like this particular atrocity has been occurring for 100 years, people get cross when they, you know, hear a story that a kitten has been abused. Of course they do. I do. It makes me cry. But and every bit of abuse is as bad as the other. But can you imagine if they found out something, which I'm not going to, you know, talk about here because that's not what this is about. But it is important to look at this because it's part of the change of the third dimension. And this is why we're doing this, is to take this separation that we experience here within the third dimension, is to take it up into a higher polarity. So we don't have to experience suffering in the way that we have. We've experienced suffering in order to experience extreme polarity, in order to learn about separation. We don't need that anymore. If you look at the Starseed Collective, they've got to a critical mass stage where they don't need that anymore, and that affects the whole of the planet. So polarity will lessen, but things are going to happen in the meantime while that's happening.
Right. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Magenta. Before we say goodbye to our audience, could you just leave them with, I love asking this question. If you were to go back to your young Magenta, what advice would you give her when she was searching for transformation? What advice would you give her?
Well, I actually did do that. And I would say to everyone, you know, do that, because when you go back to your younger self and you comfort your younger self and you heal your younger self, and you can think of all the times in your life when you were upset and crying and worried and frustrated and thought your life was over and all this, go back to those times in meditation, in relaxation, in visualization, dreaming, however you want to work, and comfort your former self and tell your former self and say, keep going, you're on the right track, things are going to be good, you're doing what you're supposed to do. When you do that, Each time you do that, you change a part of your matrix, you change your past. And when you come back, if it's integrated and assimilated, and you have the knowing that you have changed something, you come back to the self, and then you will change in response to the past that you have just changed. Also, what you do is create future to match you. So if you're talking to your past self, your future self will talk to you. So yourself 10 years, if you're going to talk to yourself 10 years in the past, yourself 10 years in the future will come and talk to you and tell you what she is doing. So it works in this synchronistic communication. So what I would actually say, as I said, I have done this, and what I would actually say, and it would depend on where I was at that time, but I wouldn't tell her too much about what I'm doing now, because I wouldn't want to put her off and think, I can't do that, because there are times in my life where I probably would have said, no, I can't do that. No, I would just give encouragement and say, especially after I learned about the Ascension in 1993, and then by 1994 I'd sort of thought, what a load of rubbish that was, because it didn't happen. I expected it to happen in 6 months when I was first told about it. I'd go back to her and say, hold that faith, and just you will know when the time is right. But the thing is, as I said, I did say all of this to myself. I already did this, and I did talk to myself all the way along. And I remember hearing someone talking and thinking, well, who is that? And at the time I thought, well, is it my granddad who'd passed over? This is before I connected with White Spirit, but I know now that I was always there for myself right from little. So I did actually do that. And it's a very powerful exercise, and I highly recommend it, because it really, really changes things.
I was just thinking what a beautiful, brilliant workshop that would be, like a little online workshop. Maybe our new company, Daily Life, could put that invitation out to you, Miss Magenta. That would be a fantastic masterclass.
Yes, it would.
Okay. Well, listen, Miss Magenta, I have taken a lot of your very valuable time. My beautiful community here at Soul Space, myself and our team here at Astrology Answers, send our heartfelt gratitude for having your beautiful essence and your energy and your books and all your wisdoms, YouTube videos. Everybody check her out. She's incredible. And just the transmission that I receive through your YouTubes, I'm telling you, is so healing. So thank you so much, Magenta.